Okay, class, I'm going to read a little bit. So I'd like you guys to open your books to page 10 in your green social studies book. Today, I want to talk about the difference between a primary source and a secondary source. This is in your book, so we're kind of going backwards a little bit. It's just something that you guys are going to need to know this year. Um, we've already talked about fossils and artifacts when we studied Ötzi, but we haven't really talked so much about primary and secondary sources. So I'm just going to read this quickly and just follow along. Again, we're on page 10 in your book. So it says, using clues, we must rely on a variety of sources to learn history. For information on the very first humans, we have fossil remains. A fossil is a part or imprint of something that was once alive. Bones and footprints preserved in rock are examples of fossils. As human beings learned to make things by accident, they also created more sources of information for us. They made what we call artifacts, objects created by and used by humans. Artifacts include coins, arrowheads, tools, toys, and pottery. Archaeologists examine artifacts and the places where the artifacts were found to learn about the past. Okay, so I think most of you pretty much know that a fossil is part of something that was once alive, and an artifact is something that was created by people. Okay, so just you need to know that distinction. All right, source of information. About 5,000 years ago, people invented writing. Okay, they wrote laws, poems, speeches, battle plans, letters, contracts, and many other things. In these written sources, historians have found countless clues about how people lived. In addition, people have recorded their messages in many ways over the centuries. Historians have studied writing carved into stone pillars, stamped onto clay tablets, scribbled on turtle shells, typed with typewriters, and sent by computer. Historical sources are of two types, so pay close attention to this, two types. A primary source, primary means first or one. Okay, a primary source is an account of an event created by someone who took part in or witnessed the events. Treaties, letters, diaries, laws, court documents, and royal commands are all primary sources. An audio or video recording of an event is also a primary source. Okay, so let me just stop for a second. So basically, it's has to be from someone who witnessed the event. So when you guys take videos of things, when you guys do, or you take pictures, those are primary sources. Okay, if someone asked if you went to say a concert, okay, and you had a video or you had photos of it, those would be primary sources. Now, if you wrote about it in a journal or online or something like that, and you were actually there, that would still be a primary source. Even if you wrote about it a year later, okay, as long as you were actually there witnessing the event, that is still considered a primary source. So it doesn't have to be written, it could be like a photograph or an audio recording, anything of somebody who actually witnessed the event. Okay, the next thing is called a secondary source. A secondary source is information gathered by someone who did not take part in or witness an event. Examples include history textbooks, journal articles, and encyclopedias. I don't know if you guys know what encyclopedias are, but sometimes in classrooms there's a whole row of these big, thick, heavy books called encyclopedias. That's what we used to have to use before the invention of the internet to find information on things. The textbook you are reading right now is a secondary source. The historians who wrote it did not take part in the events described. Instead, they gathered information about these events from different sources. Okay, so the next page says sources of change. Writers of secondary sources don't always agree about the past. Historians form different opinions about the primary sources they study. As a result, historians may not interpret past events in the same way. For example, one writer may say that a king was a brilliant military leader. Another may say that the king's armies only won their battles because they had better weapons than their enemies did. Sometimes new evidence leads to new conclusions. As historians review and reanalyze information, their interpretations can and do change. Okay, the summary and preview. Well, I'm not going to do that, but anyway, I I have an ed puzzle for you guys to do. So it's basically all about primary and secondary sources. So your assignment today, after obviously you watch this video, is to go ahead and finish the ed puzzle on primary and secondary sources. So there will be a quiz later today. So it's going to be on primary and secondary sources. It's also going to be on everything that we've studied so far. So Think about the early humans, the Paleolithic era, the Mesolithic era, and the Neolithic era. So we're gonna have a quiz on that today. So make sure you guys understand what those eras are. You can use your book if you like. It could be an open book, but you're gonna have a quiz on everything we've sort of studied so far. Okay. All right. So make sure you do the Ed puzzle first.